Hello and welcome back to part 2 of my video documenting the work that went into restoring Maggie, my 1966 Wolseley 1100. As I'd mentioned at the end of part 1, we had worked so hard getting her ready so that she could be driven to the Practical Classics Restoration Show at the NEC in March 2019 for the grand reveal. It was so exciting to finally have her on the road after all the time she'd been in pieces in the garage for, and to see her looking her best while on display for the weekend on the ADO16.info Club stand. She was in good company too, with a 1969 Morris 1100 in need of restoration, a lovely white 1964 Austin 1100, and finally a gorgeous red 1969 Morris 1300 Crayford convertible. Anyway, although she now appeared near enough complete, there were still lots of little jobs that needed attention, some of which we were able to take care of at the show. Tom and his brother Ethan spent lots of time under the bonnet, helping to clean up the engine bay. So while they were cleaning there, they would dismantle certain parts so that I could be cleaning or painting them in the meantime. Then, when there was enough access to the engine, I was able to get in there and paint that too, which completely transformed it. I also made many trips back and forth to the Auto Jumble all weekend, and one of the best buys was a new chrome rocker cover. I never imagined the engine bay would clean up as well as it did, but when you look at the before pictures, it just shows the massive transformation we managed over the weekend. Plus, amongst other things, Tom and Ethan were also able to do a full service on her, so she left the show a different car. After the NEC, we were finally able to enjoy taking Maggie out for drives and to shows, including the ADO16 National Rally, which we nearly didn't make it to, as the night before Maggie just wasn't running right and it transpired to be a chipped valve. So that night and the following morning, the engine had to come apart, but we did it and we made it to the show. Also, by this point, I'd only recently sold my Austin 1300, so in fact it was just before the NEC show, because now that Maggie was complete, I no longer had a need for two ADO16s. But because I sold it to a friend, it meant I was finally able to see the cars together for the first time, as I never actually managed it in the 7 months that I owned them both at the same time for. In the meantime, I'd also been asked if I'd like a feature put together about Maggie's restoration to go into Practical Classics magazine. I of course jumped at the idea, and it was arranged that a few days later a photographer from the magazine would turn up to get some pictures of Maggie for the article. This was great but caused a sudden panic, as like I'd mentioned in the part 1 video, I've been putting off fitting the headlining as the thought of it just scared me too much. Anyway, myself and my mum decided to tackle it, but first we were faced with an issue. As you may remember, I'd covered the inside of the roof in sound deadening. Well, annoyingly, as soon as the weather got warmer, the glue had just reacted in the heat and it all started to come down. So first we had to remove what was left of the sound deadening and then scrape away, with the help of a hairdryer, all the thick gloopy chunks of glue that had just remained on the roof, as they would have been visible under the headlining. We then got to work fitting and cutting and gluing up the headlining material. I just followed my mum's lead and it all actually went very well, so I don't know why I was so worried about it, as it ended up looking really great in the end. Then fast forward to the following day, and Matt Tompkins from Practical Classics and the photographer Bob turned up to take photos and interview me on what had been done to the car. Many photos were taken, and then we had to keep quiet about all of this for a couple of months until they published the article in the February 2020 issue, which turned out really well. We were really pleased with it, plus there was even a little picture of her in the front cover too. It also transpired that because of this article, she was being put forward to the Restorer of the Year competition for 2020. Then in the March issue the following month, the competition began with all 26 applicants. There were lots of other great restorations included, so I knew it was a really tough competition, especially as we had restored Maggie on a budget. So although we were over the moon with how she'd turned out, she probably wasn't up to the top standards that some of the others had been restored to. Out of the 26 entrants, only 8 would make the final, so voting was left down to the general public to get online and vote for their favourite. Although there would only be one winner overall, the top 8 finalists would all get to display their cars at the March 2020 Practical Classics Restoration Show. And then, amazingly, one day I just got an email after voting had closed saying I'd made the top 8, which I just couldn't believe. I was so excited, especially at the opportunity to have her at the show again, which of course, would have been a year on from when she was there last, having just had her restoration completed the previous year. But of course, COVID happened and the show was unfortunately cancelled, so Maggie never got her moment in the spotlight. The second part of the voting to find the winner still went ahead though, and the Chitty Chitty Bang Bang replica took first place. Maybe in the future she'll get the chance to go again, but for now there were still a few little jobs to do that had been bothering me for a while, including the condition of the walnut picnic tables in the back of the VP seats, as the varnish on them was so cracked and peeling, as you can see in the picture. I decided to just give this a go myself, as I was on a budget, so I carefully removed one, and trying to protect the veneer underneath, which still seemed okay, I very delicately scraped away all the varnish, which in some areas just flaked off so easily. Other areas weren't so simple, but I stuck at it, and after many, many hours, I was finally ready to apply a few coats of fresh varnish. It was by no means an easy task, and there were probably much quicker ways of doing it, but once I fitted it back into the seats, I was pleased, as you could straight away see the difference between the two tables. Anyway, I did end up putting off doing the other one, but in March last year I finally removed it and told myself it would be a lockdown project. Anyway, come September, I still hadn't done it, and with a car show in a few days that Maggie was booked in for, I decided it was finally time. With the rubbish year we'd had, it was fantastic to just finally have a show to go to at the British Motor Museum, and I was so pleased to display Maggie. Which brings us to now. I've loved attending all the shows in Maggie and going on all the journeys that we've done in her since the restoration work was complete, but there has always been a slight issue, and that's that she leaks a lot of oil. I'm constantly having to top her up, and also the oil pressure light often flickers when she's at idle, as she's just always struggled to hold oil pressure. So while that hasn't really stopped us from using her, we probably haven't used her quite as much as we would have had her engine been a little bit more healthier. So last year I managed to source a new engine for her, and all that's left really is to fit it. So the first step to remove the old engine, as you can see now, has just been done. So I'll share some pictures and clips of that with you shortly, and then hopefully later this week we'll be able to put the new engine in, and fingers crossed it's better this time and holds oil pressure. I was planning to paint up the new engine before it goes in too, but we've decided to put this on hold for a little bit, just because, for one, we're not sure of the condition of the engine, although we were told it was a running good engine. We just want to check that first, and also time for the paint to dry because it's so cold at the minute. We're just worried that it will take so long to dry, and obviously we want to get it in and get the car on the road as soon as possible. So for now I'll just share some pictures of the engine swap with you, and also for more updates don't forget to follow Maggie's Instagram at Restoring Maggie. So finally, Maggie is back together again, and thankfully the new engine seems to be rather good and actually holds oil pressure, which is brilliant. I'm so happy she's back on the road and I can use her again without worrying about the puddle of oil she'd leave behind or just constantly having to top her up with oil. She performed really well on the short test drive we did, but we didn't really want to go much further at the minute with the roads having just been gritted. But as soon as the snow all goes away, she'll get a good proper run. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed it, please like and subscribe.